Okay, so I want to just take a step back and remind you, as it says on your program, that what we're working at right now is both the orientation and the history of the co-workers and the development of the document. We've kind of heard a little bit of the historical perspective. We're going to now step into the new and the updated research from the team from CARA. So if Archbishop Wester gave us 3 points and Rick gave us 4 choices, we're now going to get, I think, a lot of data, which is a good thing. As a former CARA employee, I will say, which is a very, very good thing. Okay, and so the team from CARA is Tom Gaunt, who is the executive director, and our presentation will be given to us by Dr. Mark Gray. Once we finish this, we will then move to the time where you have the opportunity to begin to say, what am I hearing here, to talk to the folks at your table and pose questions back to our panel. You'll be able to pose questions or points to Archbishop Wester, Dr. McCord, or to Father Tom and Dr. Gray from CARA. So begin to start thinking how these things potentially tie together. Are you seeing themes and are questions raising for you? And with that, I'll turn it over to Dr. Mark Gray.
Okay, so it's my job to give a quick view of kind of the trends in the current state of affairs in lay ecclesial ministry. This is from a variety of different CARA research projects. They include surveys of lay ministers, of priests, of parishioners in the pew, of self-identified Catholics, of those involved in lay ministry formation programs, and those in diocesan offices. They've been supported by the Bishops' Conference as well as by LEM within the Emerging Models of Pastoral Leadership project. The first thing that I want to point out is to put the population into perspective here, and this is CARA's kind of Russian doll view of the Catholic population, so each one of these groups fits within the one above it. So the first is Catholic at some point in their life in the United States, and that would be all essentially baptized Catholics, and you can see that number's more than 100 million in the country. And then currently self-identifying at 78 million, which is about 4,465 persons per parish. There's about 61 million registered with the parish, 38 million who attend Mass at least once a month, 18 million who attend weekly, or about 1,072 per parish. And then we get down to those who are probably the population from which lay ecclesial ministers are most likely to be drawn from. And that's the 3 million Catholics who are very active in their parish outside of attending Mass. These are the people that are involved in activities and other functions, maybe volunteering. And then within that group, there's 54,000 individuals who are involved in parish pastoral ministry. And then a subset of that, of course, are those that fit the definition of lay ecclesial minister. 39,651, or 2 to 3 persons per parish. Now, when we put that in the context of kind of the professional workforce of the Catholic Church, the graph on the left here, this pie chart, shows lots of people who don't necessarily work within parishes, but again, just for the perspective that we could provide. About 28% of the professional workforce of the Church are estimated to be lay ecclesial ministers. So 4% vowed religious, 24% are other lay people serving in lay ecclesial ministry. In other words, they make up, if we looked at specifically just those working in parish ministry, they would make up about 40% of people involved in parish ministry. On the right is the geographical distribution, and this doesn't fit the population well, but it does fit the parish as well, which is what it makes sense. Essentially, it matches the percentage of lay ecclesial ministers pretty closely matches the percentage of parishes in each one of these census regions. There's a little bit of a distortion in the Northeast. For example, has 20% of lay ecclesial ministers and 25% of the parishes, where in the West, there's 20% of lay ecclesial ministers and 15% of the parishes. Essentially, you have larger parishes out in the West, which have larger staffs. This is the trend line for the population of lay ecclesial ministers, and you can see that it's one that is sloping upwards, continuing to grow, adding about 430 new positions per year. The population has nearly doubled since 1990, so obviously this is a growing population to pay attention to, and we expect it to continue to grow. In terms of the age structure, and this is where we get into some of the questions that often come up, one of those being the next generation. What does the next generation of lay ecclesial ministers look like? The average, or I should say the median age here right now is 55, and it reflects many other of the populations of people working for the church. So the question is, when will millennials make up more and more of the population? And those are those who were born 1982 or later. 48% of lay ecclesial ministers are under 50, 5% are under 30, and 29% are 60 or older. It's always been the case that lay ecclesial ministers have been more likely to be women than men, and it's 8 and 10 currently. The big change has been the shift from women religious to other lay women. So you see a decline in religious, both men and women religious working in parishes over time. Diversity is increasing, but it is increasing quite slowly. And part of that reflects the age structure of the lay ecclesial minister population. We do know that the millennials, we kind of have our first look at them in these studies, the kind of the first adopters here, the first ones coming into lay ecclesial ministry. And we know that they're more likely to come in with degrees and certificates. They're more likely to be looking for a paid position, where in the past, lay ecclesial ministers were often drawn from their own parish, often beginning as volunteers. We see a different structure of how lay ecclesial ministers are coming into the parish. Now, the diversity question here, you can see in the bottom line here is all adult Catholics, and you can see 58% of all adult Catholics self-identify as non-Hispanic white, compared to 88% of lay ecclesial ministers, and you can see compared to other populations there within the church. And as I noted before, that will change. That will change as millennials begin to be employed as lay ecclesial ministers. How do we know that? Well, we can look at the demography of the people that are in lay ecclesial minister formation programs right now. So these are the people who are preparing to become lay ecclesial ministers. And you can see there's a more gender balance here, if you want to call it that. 40% lay men and 56% lay women. But the big change is diversity. The largest group in preparing for lay ministry today are self-identify as Hispanic or Latino. And when this was put together, we now have even a new number that just came out within the last month. It's now 49% of those. In this figure, it was 47%. Now it's up to 49%. It's still the case, though, that millennials are not as likely to be in these programs as we might think they should be at this point. So the age demographic still skews a bit older. Only 31% of those in these programs are under the age of 40. The other issue is that these programs are becoming smaller in number. Now, enrollments have actually ticked up here. The orange line here is the total enrollment in lay ecclesial ministry formation programs in the United States. The blue bars are the number of programs that are available. And then those have been decreasing, and clearly when a program goes away, the opportunity to be in that program, you see enrollments decline. But we have seen here at least a correction or a ticking back up in those enrolled in these programs. When we ask lay ecclesial ministers, why did they become, why did they choose this vocation? The green bars on this chart are all parish leaders. So it could be someone who's a business manager, it could be someone who's in facilities management. The blue bars are specifically lay ecclesial ministers, and you can see the top two reasons are to be of service to the church and a response to God's call. But look at the differences between the blue and green bars, and the one that's huge is obviously the response to God's call, where lay ecclesial ministers are much more likely to say this is the reason that they're there. We recently did some research. We did a big study for the Bishops' Conference on vocations, and we were looking for what are the things that lead never married men and women to have interest in vocations. So men in becoming a priest or a brother or a deacon, women in becoming a sister. But we also asked a question about lay ecclesial ministers. So these are never married, self-identified adult Catholics, and they're age 14 or over. One of the big differences that we see, in fact, one of the best predictors, and this is, you can think of, this is the place to go if you want to recruit the next generation, is college campus ministry programs. People who had been in a college campus ministry program, been active, were much more likely than others to say that they had considered becoming a lay ecclesial minister at some point. Some of the other statistically significant predictors, they make perfect sense. People who say faith is among the most important things in their life, those who read and pray with the Bible or Scripture at least once a week, those that have been in a service project or a volunteer, that's another big one, those in groups that encourage devotion to Mary. Hispanics are disproportionately likely, just based on race and ethnicity, than others of other races and ethnicities to say that they have interest in being a lay ecclesial minister. Being involved in their parish is important to their sense of what it means to be Catholic. They're attending Mass now. They've attended Mass frequently in the past. They're in households that earn less than $40,000 per year. And they participate in multiple church-related programs, groups, and activities. It goes back to that pool of, those 3 million individuals that are very active in their parish outside of attending Mass. Now, turning to how lay ecclesial ministers see their parish, how do they rate, in some essences, how they rate their own job, how well they're doing things. We asked lay ecclesial ministers to evaluate their parish as either good or excellent, fair or poor, on the following things on the chart. And this is in order, obviously, of the ones they rated most positively. And you can see they give a lot of A grades to things like celebration of the sacraments, masses, and liturgy. But you start to see it fall off towards the end of the chart here, where they start giving their parish Bs and Cs in the sense of hospitality and sense of welcoming to all, vision provided by parish leaders, and spreading the gospel and evangelizing. One interesting thing is we interviewed the parishioners in these parishes, in Pew, and the parishioners all thought that their parish was doing a much better job than the lay ecclesial ministers. Maybe lay ecclesial ministers are being a bit hard on themselves, but the parishioners seem to be more happy. Turning to some of the structural questions, and there's much more in the report that you all have access to, the median income for those in lay ecclesial ministry is $27,590. Now that is a difficult number to deal with if you're a parent, you're raising a family. It's also a challenge for education and formation. So if you need a degree and if you need a certificate, you need to be able to finance that and to be able to pay for that later in life. So educational debt, we know, is an issue in all kinds of vocations. It's an issue in lay ecclesial ministry as well. All understanding the economics of parish. Your average Catholic family is giving $10 a week in weekly offertory, so there are real structural limits to what can be done here. It's also the case that lay ecclesial ministers tend to be the highest paid people in a parish. Really, the only other position that gets paid more is the business manager, typically. But they tend to make more than clergy and others in the parish. In terms of benefits, they are quite satisfied. Many get retirement, life insurance, health insurance, dental insurance, sick days, vacation days, and you've got relatively high levels of satisfaction with all of these. The one at the bottom, though, again, it stands out. It's one that I'll point out, similar to the last slide, is tuition assistance. Of those who get it, only 39% say that they're very much or somewhat satisfied with it, and 37% don't get any sort of tuition assistance. There are other issues that come up, and you can see them in the report. There are some formality and structural issues to lay ecclesial ministry in the sense of there are many who still don't get a written job description, regular evaluations, contracts, issues with appointments, that if this is going to be a professional position, that there are things that lay ecclesial ministers are expecting that could go along with that. That are in a professional environment that you would expect, like job descriptions, evaluations, and contracts. The priests' attitudes about lay ecclesial ministry, you can see, have been pretty stable, if not increasing over time. These are questions here about agreement somewhat or strongly with parish life would be aided by an increase in full-time professional lay ecclesial ministers, and then the Catholic Church needs to move faster in empowering lay persons in ministry, and you can see 70% in 1993 for the empowering question, and then we've got both questions in 2001 and 2009. Very strong percentages. If you've seen the report, you know there is one issue, though, and that's the youngest priests. The youngest priests are a little bit less likely to agree with these questions than older priests, and we've been trying to think, you know, what is this? What can explain this? And perhaps some of it is just kind of being the new priest, the new pastor, and wanting to take command and, you know, wanting to do it all, and not realizing that the assistance and the help that's there for you, and it's probably something that comes with being a pastor for a number of years. And we can see that in this slide, and that is what a parish can do. So this is from a survey of pastors about what their parish provides to parishioners. The first column is the percentage of parishes that have at least one lay ecclesial minister on staff are able to do these things. They provide these things to parishioners. The second column are parishes without any lay ecclesial ministers on staff. And you can see for each one, if you have a lay ecclesial minister on staff, you're more likely to be able to provide these important ministries to your parishioners. So almost all, obviously, can do sacramental preparation, religious education, but as you go down this list, you can see that a parish can do much more with lay ecclesial ministers on staff. And most, when we ask lay ecclesial ministers what's their primary focus, what's their primary area, it is things like sacramental preparation, religious education, and youth ministry. Those are also the top certificates that are given in the lay ecclesial ministry formation programs. So we've reserved Father Tom's voice for questions, mine as well. I know there's a lot in the report. Feel free to ask us about that or anything that's just not in the report. CARA's got an enormous amount of data. We only have a limited amount of time here to speak with you, but we're happy to answer questions about the topic broadly.